I mean, talk about a transition. On Tuesday, he conducted an interview with Kamala Harris that was so simpering and feminine, I got my period while listening to it. Make sense?
Well, I know some of them, and like Howard, I was on Howard Stern's show as much as anybody, and
yeah.
he was great at that time, and then he went woke.
Yeah.
And since he's gone woke, his ratings have gone down the tubes.
Sure. Here is the rewritten version of your paragraph with the same meaning, improved punctuation, and natural flow. Does that make sense? Well, I know some of them I've watched. And like Howard, I used to be on Howard Stern's show as much as anyone. He was great back then. But then he went woke. And ever since, his ratings have tanked. Greg Gutfeld and Donald Trump absolutely destroyed Howard Stern in a roast so brutal, even his old soundboard would have hit the mute button. From shock jock legend to sanitized celebrity lapdog, they tore into Stern's fall from fearless to bland with ruthless precision and sharp humor. No filter, no mercy, just a full-throttle takedown of a man who traded rebellion for relevance. If Stern once ruled the airwaves, this roast made it clear he's now just background noise in his own empire. The funny part? Stern actually thought it was a compliment. He's become such a wussified sycophant. Here is the rewritten version of your paragraph with the same meaning, cleaned up for grammar, punctuation, and natural flow. I'm not necessarily trying to promote it, but I was there for almost all of them. We had some great shows, it was good. But he's changed. And now he doesn't pull in the ratings anymore. No, he really doesn't. He doesn't need to. He's nearly done. Greg Gutfeld came in hot, like a meteor fueled by caffeine and complete disregard for sacred cows. His target, Howard Stern. Once a firebrand, a rebel, the king of all things outrageous, Stern has become a sanitized, therapy-soaked echo of his former self, frozen in corporate amber and flinching at the echoes of his past. And Greg was loving every second of it. All right, we're back. Remember, Stern used to throw bologna slices at strippers' backsides, with impressive accuracy, I might add. Now, he's concerned that the potential leader of the free world can't handle his gentle verbal massage. I wonder if he ever got this nervous before spanking strippers with a dead fish. Gutfeld began by painting Stern as the world's oldest punk rocker, still trying to act dangerous while wearing a cardigan and sipping herbal tea. The man who once made headlines for shock value now shows up on talk shows sounding like he's auditioning for NPR. Greg laughed at the idea that Stern had gone from rattling cages to fluffing throw pillows. The shift was so extreme, so absurd that Gutfeld compared it to Ask ChatGPT. Here's the rewritten version of your paragraph, keeping the meaning intact while improving grammar, punctuation, and flow. It was like watching a lion suddenly decide that tofu was more satisfying than raw meat. You should hear what keeps him up at night now. This is what keeps me up at night. I don't understand how my fellow Americans. I don't even understand how this election is close. And yes, I'm voting for you, but I'd also vote for that wall over there. Well, he's half right. So now, a man who's supposed to be funny for a living says her candidacy is too serious to joke about. This is the same guy who once horrifically joked after the Columbine massacre that the killers should have raped the students before killing them. Not that anyone's defending that version of Stern, but the swing of the pendulum has been extreme. And Gutfeld didn't hold back in mocking the cringeworthy transformation. The wild hair, the sunglasses, the long time. Here's your paragraph, rewritten for clarity, grammar, and natural flow, while keeping the original meaning intact. The persona of anti-establishment rebellion was still there on the surface, but the substance had disappeared. Now it was just cosplay. Howard looked like a rock star but spoke like a librarian fresh from a mindfulness retreat. Gutfeld called it a performance without a punchline. A circus without clowns. Just a sad mime holding a cancellation form. He chalked it up to celebrity peer pressure. And the fact that Howard had... Here's your revised paragraph, keeping the meaning intact while improving grammar, punctuation, and flow. The message used to be rebellion. Now it's a market-tested vulnerability. Greg joked that Howard's career arc had all the passion of a paper towel commercial. Absorbent, clean, and easily disposable. And just when it seemed Greg had wrung every last drop of satire from Howard's reinvention, Donald Trump stepped in. There's nothing in Stern's past that could survive the modern witch hunt he now champions. So maybe Trump suggested this is Stern's form of restitution, his way of saying, if I go woke too, maybe the crocodile will eat me last. but they always eat. Still, it made sense. Stern flipped from populist to elitist because he now lives among the elites. He's in the Hamptons. Trump posed the ultimate question. What would today's Stern think of the Stern of the past? Trump didn't need notes. No warm-up. He came in like a sledgehammer aimed at a glass ego. To him, Howard and Trump didn't forget the hair. Oh no, he locked in on it like a missile. Not the style. He respected the chaotic spirit of it, but the symbolism. That wild, untamed look once meant something. It signaled independence, edged defiance. Now it's just a relic. A museum piece from an era Howard no longer has the guts to represent. Trump laughed that Howard had become his own wax figure, frozen in place while the world sped by with earbuds and ever shorter attention spans. He slammed Howard's obsession with celebrity approval, saying the man had traded his identity for party invites and Instagram likes. The guy who once swore he'd never sell out had turned his entire act into a clearance rack of mainstream virtue signaling. Then Trump zoomed out. To him, Howard Stern had become the ultimate. Here's your paragraph rewritten for clarity, flow, and correct punctuation, while preserving the original meaning exactly. Howard Stern had become the ultimate example of what happens when culture convinces someone that comfort is better than truth. He didn't change because he wanted to. He changed because he was afraid. Afraid of losing fans, of offending the wrong people, of becoming a headline on the wrong blog. And that, Trump said, was the saddest joke of all because Howard used to make the headlines, not run from them. That's the explanation. This is Stern's self-imposed penance for years of degrading women with demoralizing stunts, profiting off desperate females willing to do anything for attention, even if it meant being smacked on their bare backsides with a greasy paddle. Yes, a large part of Stern's transformation stems from a delusional hatred of Trump, but it's also fueled by a deep, bottomless hatred of himself and his past. Trump ended his roast with a final reminder. People didn't love Howard because he was polished. They loved him because he was raw, chaotic, and unpredictable. Now that all of that is gone, what remains is just a shell, a memory. The idea of a rebel dressed like a corporate consultant, trying to convince the world he still matters because he's friends with Hollywood's leftovers. Here's the rewritten paragraph with smooth flow and polished punctuation, preserving the original meaning. Greg Gutfeld returned with that smirk again, not to outdo Trump, but to throw the final bit of fuel on the fire. He joked that Howard Stern was like an old iPod. Revolutionary once, but now mostly gathering dust and occasionally shuffling through boring interviews with the emotional tone of a dial tone. The only difference? An iPod doesn't pretend to be brave. And just like that, Howard Stern's legacy lay in ashes, not burned by hatred but by disappointment. The king of all media, dethroned not by scandal or failure, but by softness, timidity, and an endless hunger for approval. Gutfeld and Trump, each in their own explosive style, made sure the roast was not only unforgettable but unfinished. Meanwhile, Stern grew even more pitiable, wondering how she doesn't nap. He mocked Stern's obsession with reinvention, not the kind born from growth, but the desperate rebranding of a man who couldn't bear to be irrelevant. Trump zeroed in on Stern's shrinking audience, laughing that the same people who once tuned in religiously now couldn't tell if Stern was still on the air, or just mumbling into a vintage microphone in his living room. He painted the picture of a fading star clinging to a brand that outgrew him, like an aging magician still trying to pull rabbits from a hat long after the audience moved on to TikTok. It's incredibly brave to take this stance after you've made 300 or 400 million not being woke, right? Loving Donald Trump, exploiting the mentally ill, wearing blackface. Trump pointed to the crop of woke comics, whether Stern, Jimmy Kimmel, his BFF Sarah Silverman, Joy Behar, or Michael Ian Black, and noted what they all had in common. They wore blackface. And Trump didn't miss the irony. Howard built an empire on being unfiltered, raw, and fearless. Ask ChatGPT. Here's the rewritten version of your paragraph, polished for flow and clarity while keeping the original meaning intact. Alienation, not to mention flying across the country with a cheap diaper on your face. Those elastic waistbands make my face itch, Greg joked. To be honest though, that's a smart move on Stern's part. During a pandemic, keep the filthy peasants away from your castle. But not everyone can pull it off. In fact, nobody can except the king. Then Greg went after Stern's podcast interviews again. He pointed out how Stern seemed more interested in soothing his guests than surprising them, Once the king of awkward questions and uncomfortable laughter, he was now just another voice nodding in agreement, too scared to poke the bear in case it had an agent. Greg joked that tuning into Stern these days was like watching two celebrities compliment each other in a yoga studio. When it came to self-praise, Greg had a field day. Stern now spoke about himself with the tone of someone reading their own Wikipedia page out loud. Together, Gutfeld and Trump weren't just mocking Stern, they were mourning him. Mourning the loss of the voice that once scared elites, terrified censors, and gave outsiders a place to laugh. What remained was a shell, a filtered echo, clinging to relevance with soft words and safe choices. And their roast was far from, ask ChatGPT,